I'm sure you've heard about interest, and it is something that can be paid to you or something you can pay to someone else if you borrow money. So we're going to look at two different kinds of interest this year. We're going to look at simple interest, and we're also going to look at compound interest. We'll start off with simple. Okay, so the way that this is normally used is in car loans. So you would pay simple interest if you borrow money to buy a car, which most people do. And something else we're going to do later on connected to simple interest, which is hire purchase, which is when you hire something until you've paid it off and then you've purchased it. Okay, so the one that you will be aware of from family members that have bought cars is that car loans are charged on simple interest. Okay, so it is interest-based, interest extra money and a percentage, based on the original amount invested or borrowed. Okay, so you're always paying a percentage of the original price of that car. Money can be invested or borrowed for a certain time period at a specific interest rate. Okay, so you always hear about the basis points and interest rates changing. And so that goes up and down over time. For simple interest, the interest is calculated once a year, and we often use the word annum. And per year is PA, per annum. And then it will be added at the end of the arranged period. And then you will need to pay off the amount that you borrowed as well as the amount of interest. Okay, here is a formula that you need to learn off by heart. Okay, and I'll explain what everything stands for. So your A is your accumulated amount. So that's the amount that you end up owing at the end of the loan, or the amount that you get paid back when your investment has stopped. The P stands for principal, meaning first amount. So it's the original amount that you borrow or the original amount invested. Your interest rate is a percentage. Percentage can be written as a fraction or a decimal, as you know. We can also use the percentage button on our calculator. And then N is the number of periods, the number of time periods. Our N will be years until you get to a later grade when we change that into different time periods. So for now, N stands for number of years. Okay, here's a tip for you. The interest rate and period should be expressed in terms of the same period. So if I'm talking about a 17% interest rate per year, then I need to be dealing with years. Okay, so they all have to be days or months or years, and we are pretty much always going to talk about years. Months will come into it, but you'll be able to see that when it comes up. Okay, and then let's just look at this, and I'm also going to rewrite it as a different equation. Your A amount equals the amount that you started with plus the interest. Another way of looking at that is saying the amount of interest equals the amount that you finished off with subtracted the amount that you started off with. Okay, we're going to apply that formula, and the first example is where we are calculating the final amount. Okay, it says calculate the final amount, so they want A, on a capital amount, that will be my P value, of 7,600 Rand, invested for 6 years at 8.5% per annum, there's those words, simple interest. Okay, we're going to lay out our question in the following way. There are 4 variables in this equation. There's A, there's P, there's I, and there's N. And I'd like you to lay it out like this. A is the thing we don't know, so A gets a question mark. P is the amount that is invested, the 7,600. I is the interest rate, and you're going to now need to make a decision how you want to work with interest rate. I'm going to show you 3 examples. So I can be 8.5 with the percent button, or it can be 0,085. I'll just put forward slashes there, or it can be 8.5 over 100, and my N is 6 years. I do like to go and put an actual number when they put the number in words. Okay, please do this with me. Pick up your calculator, and then we're going to try 3 different ways of using the percentage. So I'm going to now write down my formula. I need to learn this off by heart. Okay. It's 1 plus I times n. Okay, this is the one I don't know. And then I need to plug in all of these numbers as I've written them down. So that one is the 7,600. We've got 1 plus my I. We now need to decide how you want to write it. So we're going to do it 3 different ways. This is the way, not my personal favorite, but it's the way that most of the kids I've taught prefer doing it. They like to actually use the percentage button. And I'm just going to put a times in there so that we're really mindful of the fact that things that are stuck together are multiplied. Okay, now what you're going to do on your calculator is you're going to do it 3 different ways. Okay, so I'm typing with you. Type in your 7,600 and open brackets. Let's type in exactly what we can see there. Let's type in 1 plus 8.5. And now you need to find the percentage button, which on the Casio is the shift function on your left-hand bracket. Okay, and then I'm going to say times 6, and I'm going to close brackets. Okay, so my answer should be 11476, and obviously that's in rands, and there's no cents. But I want you to now go back on your calculator, and I want you to go and press your arrow button, and go and change that 8.5% to those other 2 options, and then you can choose what you want to work with. We can say 0.085, and if you type that in correctly and you press equals, you will see you get exactly the same answer. And then go back and type in as a fraction the 8,5 over 100 using the fraction button and press equals, and you'll see you get the same answer. And so you now need to decide which one you prefer to use and then stick with that. Okay, all of them are perfectly correct. Let's look at a second example. We're also finding A for this one. Ingrid invests 45,000 Rand for 12 years and it's 13% per annum simple interest. So that just tells us to use the formula that we looked at a moment ago. How much will she have saved? So what is the A value at the end of 12 years? Okay, I'm going to write down A equals, P equals, I equals, and N equals. A is the unknown, it gets a question mark. P is the amount invested. I is the 13%, or my 0,13, or 13 over 100. And N is 12 years. Okay, A equals P, 1 plus I times N. I'd like you to write out that formula every single time you have to use it, because when you have to write something out many times, you'll learn it off by heart so much quicker. Right, what I'm doing now is I'm substituting in, and you get marks for doing that, so you must show your substitution, please. It's going to be 13%. I'm going to make that 0,13 times the 12. So I'm just doing it with the decimal this time. Okay, and then I can get my marks for the formula, get my marks for substituting in, and then plug that all into the calculator. I don't have to show any steps after that point. I can just plug and play and get my answer straight away. You should get 115,200 Rand as the final amount. Okay, now if they want to know how much interest she'd earned, so I'm just adding on an extra question that is not here. If they said how much interest she had earned, I could then say, well, the interest amount is actually that amount that we finished up with minus the amount that she started with. Okay, so you can see interest amount and interest percentage are not the same thing, and I really do want you to get your head around that. Okay, if I do that, it means that we have earned 70,200 Rand. Okay, this wasn't actually part of the question, but I'd like you to write it down anyway, because it helps you understand the kinds of questions that can be used to extend this example that we've just done. All right, the next example is calculating P. So what we're actually going to be doing there is we're going to be using some of our grade 8 skills, and we're going to solve for P as the unknown in the equation. Okay, let's have a look at how those go in terms of words. Johanna started to save money 6, I'm going to put a 6, years ago. That's clearly our time period. The current value of his investment. Okay, what does that mean? Current value now, not 6 years ago, but now. The current value of his investment is 38,000. So that's the accumulated amount. That's the amount that he now has after the investment of 6 years. The interest rate for the investment was 7% per annum, simple interest. How much did he invest 6 years ago? Right, A equals, P equals, and I and N. Okay, so A is no longer the unknown. A is my 38,000. P is the unknown. I is my 7%, and N is the 6. Okay, so let's write out the formula again. A equals P, 1 plus IN, and let's sub everything in. So I'm going to now put 38,000 equals the P, which is the unknown, so it stays a variable. 1 plus I is 7%. Let's make it a fraction this time. Times by 6. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to find this bracket. We're going to think bed mass. We're going to find out what is that bracket as a number. I'm going to write it as a long number there, and then I'm going to solve for P in the last line of my equation. Okay, so the next thing is to type this into your calculator, your 1 plus 7% times 6, or however you've chosen to work with percentage, and get it as a decimal. I get 1,42. And now it's really obvious what to do next, because P is joined to 1,42 by multiplication. So the way that you get rid of that in an equation is you divide by the 1,42 on both sides. And you might even want to show that. You don't have to show it, but this might just remind you of those equation skills you learned last year. Obviously, these guys then cancel, right? And then P equals whatever the answer is to that 38,000 divided by the 1,42. Okay, so you're going to have your answer here. P equals, take your 38,000, and you're going to divide by 1,42. Okay, so that is 26,760, and then we've got a whole lot of decimals going on there. And that is 5633, so it's going to be 56 rounded off the 2 decimal places. So now the P value is a lot less than the A value. Is that correct? Yes, because we were earning interest, and this is the amount. I'm just going to make a little note here. This is the amount before the interest was added. So again, if you wanted to know how much interest was actually earned, you could just take 38,000 and you can subtract your 26,760.56, and then you will get your actual amount of interest earned. Question B asks, what amount should be invested for 3 years to ensure a return of 67,760? The return is your total amount. Okay, it's your total amount at the end, which means it is your A value. Okay, they tell us simple interest and they tell us 7% per annum. I'm going to write here A equals, P equals, I equals, and N equals. I know that my A is the 67,760. My P is the question mark. I is 7% and N is 3 years. Okay, A equals P, 1 plus IN. A is the 67,760. P is my unknown. 1 plus I is 7%. Let's use percentage button. And I'm going to multiply that by 3. So my next step, remember, is I'm going to take this entire bracket and I'm going to get that as a decimal that I can then divide on both sides. That is 1,21. And now I'm not going to show that extra step. I'm just going to take my 67,760 and I'm going to divide by 1,21. I then get P equals 56,000 Rand on the dot. So that means that we invested the 56,000 Rand and we got 67,760 after the 3 years with a 7% interest per year. Example 14 is a little bit more tricky because here I'm solving an equation still, but I'm solving for something inside the bracket. So it's going to feel a little more complex, okay? And your solving equation skills are really going to be helpful here. Okay, they say calculate the interest rate. I want to show you another technique. If I write my A equals P equals I and N, if I do that before I even read the question, and then they say to me calculate the interest rate, it means I immediately know that my question mark is the I, okay? Right, calculate the interest rate at which 560,000 will grow to 728,500. Okay, which is which? This must be the P, this must be the A. For the purposes of what we're doing now, P will always be smaller than A. So P is my 560,000. So you can see I'm jumping between looking at the question and writing down my information. It'll grow there if invested for 5 years. Great. N is 5. Interest is calculated as simple interest. Remember that I said we'll also study compound interest? So this is just a way of making sure you know which formula you've got to use. Okay, and let's go write that out again. 1 plus I times N, or you can just put I in. Okay, so I've got my 728,500. I've got the 560,000, so that's different to the previous one. I've got 1 because 1 is just 1. My I is what I don't know, so I have to leave it as I, and my N is the 5. Okay, now we need to solve the equation. The unknown in this equation is I. That means that I need to get rid of the 560,000 and the 1 and the 5. I need to get I all by itself. Okay, and we work solving equations outside in. The first thing to do is to divide both sides of the equation by the 560,000. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to divide that on both sides. So I'm going to take my calculator and I'm typing in 728,500, and I am dividing by the 560,000. Okay, what I then get is quite a long number. I can either keep it as a fraction or I can move it into a decimal. I find it more useful to keep it as a fraction at this point. Just check that you're getting what I'm getting on your calculator. Okay, so that now equals, I've already divided by the 560,000. Okay, so that's gone. The 560,000 is gone. I'm now left with 1 plus, and look what I'm going to do now. I'm going to say not I times 5, but I'm going to say 5I. Because we learned last year that when things are multiplied, you can just stick them together. I now want I by itself. I is attached to the 5 and to the 1. And we're working outside in, so we get rid of the thing that is furthest away first. And that is that 1. So here, 1 is actually a positive. And in order to solve the equation, I now need to subtract 1 on both sides. You probably remember that as well. So I can put there minus 1, or I can just do it on the calculator. Now I'm looking down at my calculator screen and I can see this fraction that I wrote down is still there. And I'm going to use the fact that that is still on my screen to my advantage. I'm going to take that thing on my screen, or if I forgot it, I can just retype that. I'm going to say minus 1. And when I do that, I get 337. Okay, over the same denominator. And that equals, hang on a minute, plus 1 minus 1, that gets cancelled. That equals 5I. And now I need to get I by itself. Both of these things have to divide by 5 to get I by itself. Okay, so I can show that step or I can just do it on the calculator, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this number, which is still sitting on my screen, and I'm going to divide it by 5. And you'll see that the calculator uses the answer button. It actually goes and says there ANS, which tells you that you're working with the answer. I'm going to take that number and I'm going to divide it by 5. At that point, I can now convert to a percentage. Okay, so if I get that, I'm going to get 0.0601 and a whole lot of other decimal points. I need to convert that to a percentage. So I'm going to say R to make it into an interest rate. Let's go 1, 2. It's 6,017. Okay, there was a 7 there, so that 1 will now go up to 2. 6,02%. Okay, you might actually want to play that example back and follow the steps again, because it might be a while since you last solved equations and you might need a bit of a recap. For those who are ready, move on to the next example with me. Nkosinathi invested 6,000 Rand and that accumulated to 10,000 Rand after 3 years. Find the annual interest rate if the investment earned simple interest, and then round your answer to 1 decimal place. Remember that your standard instruction is always 2 decimal places. So when they say 1 decimal place, there's actually normally a mark for doing that rounding off differently. We know that that is the unknown. The A is the bigger amount, the 10,000. The P is the smaller amount, the 6,000. N is 3. Okay, A equals P, 1 plus I, N. Let's just make sure we sub in the A and P correctly. The A is the 10,000. The P is 6,000. 1 plus my I, which I don't know, times the 3. Maybe at this point I should just say 3I. Or you can write I times 3, whatever works for you. Okay, I'm going to show the steps this time. And I'm going to show that I'm dividing by 6,000. So you might find that you prefer not to show these steps or that you do. It's really up to you. Those guys will cancel, but obviously the 10,000 divided by 6,000 is going to simplify. And that simplifies to 5 over 3. And that's 1 plus 3I. The next thing I'm getting rid of is the 1, and I need to subtract it on both sides. So I can show that minus 1 is 1 plus the 3I minus 1. So then those guys will cancel. I'll be left with 3I by itself, and then on my left-hand side, hopefully I kept the 5 over 3 on my calculator, and I can just take that and minus 1. I then get 2 over 3. I'm going to finish the question up here on the right. I now need to divide both sides, my 2 over 3 and my 3I. I've got to divide both sides by 3. And that again, I'm going to do on the calculator. Okay, I get 2 over 9 and I get I. And of course, an interest rate is not a fraction like that, so that needs to be changed. Okay, you might even remember this from doing recurring decimals. So when I change S to D, it's going to be 0,2 recurring. Okay, so 0,2, 2, 2, and so on equals I. But I need to change it into an interest rate, and a rate is a percentage. Okay, so I know that if I make that into a percentage, I'm going to multiply by 100, and it's going to be 22,22%, isn't it? But that's not what they asked for. They asked for 1 decimal place. Let me just put there equals R. So actually it's 22,2% is my final answer, correctly rounded off to 1 decimal place. My last example for this video is calculating N. And luckily enough, if you manage to get your head around calculating I, you're going to find that this works very, very similarly. Okay, I'm going to go through my rigmarole here of putting all my different variables down. And I'm going to fill them in as I read through the question. If an amount accumulates from 800 Rand to 838 Rand 40, okay, that must be the P and that must be the A. Calculate the number of months. Oh, that's weird, number of months. I'm just making a big comment to myself here because we don't normally work with months, we work with years. But I did say earlier that when you've got to work with months, it'll become quite obvious. And that is the number of months for which the amount was invested at 4% annual simple interest. Okay, so A is my 838, 40. P is my 800. The number of months is what we don't know, and the interest rate is 4%. Okay, so A equals P, 1 plus IN. A is my 838.40. P is the 800, and then I'm going to say 1 plus. I is my 4%, and N is the unknown. I'm putting a times there. Right. Same story. I'm going to divide by the 800 on both sides because my unknown is n, and I need to get n by itself, which is actually very similar to getting I by itself because those guys are attached by multiplication. Okay, so let's work on our calculators and let's work with the calculator screen. We're going to type in 838.4 and we're going to divide it by 800 and we're going to get a fraction. We're going to get 131 over 125. And remember that when we've divided through by the 800, it's gone on both sides. And we're going to say 1 plus, okay, let's think this one through now. We've got 4% times n. So it might be better to write it as 4 over 100 times n, but you could leave it as the percent, okay. Next up is to take off the 1 on both sides. So when I take it off on the right-hand side, that goes. When I take it off on the left-hand side, I've got to use what's on my calculator screen, and I've got to minus 1. I then get 6 out of 125, and that is 4% or 4 over 100 times n. And now I hope that you realize what we need to do as our last step is we need to divide both sides by whatever is attached to n by multiplication. So I need to now take my 6 over 125 and I need to divide by, either I can type in my fraction, which is 4 out of 100, or I can say 6 out of 125 divided by 4%. Okay. What I then get is I get 1.2. And of course, my answer is in years, because remember that everything here, n is used as years. So 1.2 years, and then what they asked for is months. So that's just an additional step I've got to take. How do I convert years to months? Well, I times by 12. So I'm going to take 1.2, and I'm going to times by 12, and I'm going to get 14.4 months, and there would be an extra mark for an extra step to convert years into months. The last question starts with the words how long, which means we don't know n. So I can immediately go and put in my variable. That is the one that gets the question mark. How long would it take for an investment of 40,000 Rand, okay, so that's the p-value, to increase by 5,000 Rand? Okay, that is a trick question, isn't it? To increase by 5,000. Well, it's definitely not going from 40,000 to 5,000 Rand, because that would not be a good investment at all. And we know for these questions, A has to be bigger than P. So what does that mean? To increase by 45,000 Rand? Well, it means that my A value is 45,000. Be careful with finance. It can get a bit tricky with the words. Okay, so just managed to not fall into that little pothole. And now the interest is 4.5%. Okay, let's go. Write out the formula and sub in all the numbers. 45,000 equals 40,000 times by 1 plus 4.5% times my n that I don't know. Okay, dividing both sides, let's work on our calculator. We're typing in 45,000. Divide by 40,000 and we get 9 over 8 on this side. You'll notice these are always improper fractions. That now equals 1 plus 4.5% times n. What I need to do now is I need to subtract 1 on both sides. So I'm going to say my 9 over 8, which is still on my calculator screen, and I'm going to subtract 1, which gives me 1 over 8, and that equals 4.5% times n. My last step then is to divide both sides by 4.5%. This time I'm going to use the percentage button. I'm going to have my 1 over 8, which is still on my calculator screen, and I'm going to divide by 4.5, and then I'm going to use the percent button. What I get then, if I convert from surd to decimal, is I get 2.7 recurring. Okay, now I don't have an instruction. They don't tell me convert to months, and they don't tell me to round off to 1 decimal place. which means, and here I'm going to use a squiggly equal sign to let everyone know, hey, I am actually rounding off. It's 2,7. We look at the third one, which takes it up. So it's 2,78 years.